Payatu is a research-powered cybersecurity consulting firm. We have a decade-long track record with a singular focus on cybersecurity. The foundation of Payatu rests upon three pillars: community and conferences, consulting and training, products. Community and conferences encompass Nalcon, an international security conference, training, and exhibition platform. Hardware.io is a hardware security focused conference along with other initiatives. Consulting and training focuses on thorough security assessments, which helps businesses to discover security threats and further provide training to strengthen network infrastructure. Lastly, we have three offerings: IoT Auditor, an IT security testing and compliance platform; Exploity, an open source IoT security testing framework; Exploity Academy, a comprehensive online learning platform that empowers professionals with the knowledge and skills to excel in the field of cybersecurity, particularly in the context of securing IoT devices. Here is an overview of the various consulting assessments we are known for across the globe. We have delivered many cyber talks and workshops in top security conferences that also include Black Hat and DEF CON. For those unaware about the community, Payatu has a Telegram community. This is a platform meant for fostering knowledge sharing and collaboration in the cybersecurity realm. The community aims to educate various organizations with industry specific cybersecurity content. That was all about Payatu. Today, our speaker Sudarson, Payatu's security consultant, will deliver a webinar on GRC for cybersecurity and ISO or IEC 27001 approach. You can read all about him on this slide. Before I hand it over to him, I request you all to follow a few housekeeping tips. Please be on mute. If you have a question, you can write it in the chat box. We'll answer the question at the end of the session. Lastly, I would request you all to adjust your window to fit to window for this session. We will be releasing the recording of this session on our digital channel, so make sure you are following Payatu. If you are not currently following Payatu, please check the links provided in the chat box to find Payatu's digital channels. Without further ado, let's get started. Sudarshan, over to you.
Hello everyone. I hope my screen is visible, right?
Yeah, your screen is visible.
Uh, Thanks for joining. Welcome you all. So, uh, Today we're gonna see some strategical implementation and strategical direction where we lead our organization into a information security management system perspective. So, I'll just introduce myself. So, hi everyone. This is Sudashan Prabhu. I work as a security consultant in Payatu. So for the last 4 years, I have been working with standards like ISO 27001, 22301, and ISO 42001, and it mostly around implementation, audits, solving real security problems and complaints problem in organization. Today, I'll be sharing what I have seen actually worked in organizations and how organization can approach a GRC realistically on a where they are, like where they are standing as an organization. Okay, so. Before we get into the agenda, let me just clarify one thing upfront. This webinar is not going to be an usual ISO 27001 session. We are not going to talk about the ISO 27001 history, the 93 controls that are present in ISO 27001, and or the PDCA cycle that how the implementation works, right? So you can find all that easily in books and online courses, or you can just search for these online, you can get those. So the webinar is about understanding GRC from a strategic point of view, how a GRC implementation actually works inside an organization as it grows. Okay. With that context, here's how today's session is structured. So uh, we'll be talking about the real job of GRC, what actually GRC do beyond the documentations, audits, and certifications. Okay. Then we look at GRC as a parenting mindset using ISO 27001, not as a checklist, but as a way of thinking. Okay. So from there, we'll walk through three practical stages where an organization goes through when it is a kids, when it becomes an adult, and when it finally reaches to the maturity. Okay. So at each stage, instead of asking standards say, We'll ask what does the organization actually need right now. By the end of the session, you should have a clarity on where the organization stands today, what to focus on that, what to focus on where we stand. Okay. So first you will gain the clarity on how to strategically plan ISO 27001 implementation based on organization's maturity. Okay. And then second, you will be able to assess where your organization currently stands in its cybersecurity and GRC maturity. So third one is you will understand what to focus at each stage of a growth, what needs to be prioritized. So your efforts are prioritized, meaningful, and sustainable. Okay. Together, these outcomes helps make ISO 27001 feel more structured, practical, and achievable. Okay. So, okay, let's jump into this our practical webinar. So let me start with a simple question. When you hear a word about GRC, what comes to your mind first? For most people, it's policies, documentation, audits, and certification, right? And honestly, that's not wrong, but that's not the full picture of GRC. So those things that are just outputs of GRC, they are not real job of what the GRC consultants or GRC executives do in their organization. Okay. The real job of GRC starts much earlier when an organization making decisions about growth, speed, technology, and people. Okay. So GRC is there to quietly ask one question. Let's say, are we going in a right way? Are we going in a way that we can actually handle? When a GRC works well, the organization doesn't feel slowed. It feels guided. Teams knows what is acceptable. Leadership understands the risk and surprise reduces. Okay. So if GRC only appears during an audit after an incident, then it's already too late. And that's where the fear around GRC comes from. Okay. So as its core, GRC is actually very simple. It is not a framework problem or a tooling problem. It's about asking the right question at the right time. Governance asks, where are we going? Who is responsible for what? So, since we implement multiple processes, multiple uh, operations related to business in our organization, just governance team will ask, where are we going? Are we going towards our mission and vision? Who is responsible for what processes? And are they taking the responsibilities? And then when the risk management team handles, risk management team asks, if we continue this way, what could realistically go wrong? So whenever we implement new organization operations, business operations, whenever we implement new technology, whenever we implement new tools and assets into our organization, then the risk management team will definitely ask, if we continue this way, if we implement new tools and technologies, what could realistically go wrong? Is there any business impact, any technical impact to our organization? That's the responsibility role of risk management team. Okay. There is another team called compliance. Compliance team asks, what rules do we need to expect while doing all of this implementation? Since we need to monitor and make our continuous improvement, compliance is there to assure that uh, the implementation of tools and technologies are going in a right way. Okay. When these three works together, something interesting happens. Security stops being reactive. Instead of fixing issues, after incidents and organization starts preventing predictable mistakes, audit becomes very easier, not because of documentations are perfect. It's because of behavior is very consistent. The securities controls and processes are implemented in a very habitual way. Okay. So good GRC doesn't remove all the risk, and it should not actually. What it does is reduce the surprises, and in cybersecurity, fewer surprises means better sleep, fewer fire drills, and more confidence in the decision. Okay. So let's get into our next topic. So we are planning this entire session into a parenting kind of theme. So we are not just gonna get into the theoretical part of this ISO 27001, all the clause 4 to 10s, and then 93 controls that is present in our annexure A controls. So we are not going deep down. Our brains are not able to handle all of this. So what we did, we have made a theme. It's like a parenting kind of thing. So how a parent grows a child. Likewise, a GRC team grows an organization. So what will be their role of GRC team? In that perspective, we are gonna run through this entire session. Okay. Let's about parenting for a moment. Okay. Good parenting is not about controlling every move of a child, right? So, if that was a goal, the child would never learn how to think independently. Parenting is about getting boundaries, explaining consequences, and slowly preparing someone to take the responsibility of their own. Okay, so GRC works in exactly same way. When the inside the organization, when the GRC is treated like a strict policing, strict rules, and don't do this, don't do that, like that, teams naturally try to bypass it. Shadow appears. They will find a way to just bypass the rules. They will just find a way to use the technologies in a uh, unruled way. Like they try to bypass it. Okay. There will be a lot of shortcuts happening. Okay. But when GRC act like a parent, it guide the teams, explain why the certain decisions are risky. Okay. And helps them to grow into a responsible decision makers. And that's exactly the mindset of ISO 27001 is trying to promote. Not blind control, but controlled independence. Okay. So now we'll try to translate this parenting idea directly into GRC. Okay. In many organizations, GRC is seen as a blocker. Why? Because if any tool requirement or technological requirement are requested, any access are requested from any teams, it will go to multiple people for an approval. It will make delays. So all the organization employees will think the GRC as a blocker. Why it is there? We can just simply ask the access from IT team directly, we'll get it. Why this much of approvals? Why this much of mails? Okay. Something that says no at the last moment, but that's not how a good GRC works. Just like parent does not stop a child from exploring, GRC should not stop teams from building or innovating. Instead, it should guide them in a early before decision turns into a problem. Okay. Good GRC sets guardrail rather than strict rules. So, a really good practical GRC team will not create uh, non-sensible controls or measures to control the security or control the people over the business. Good GRC team create controls, make the security aware to the people, which is really aligned with the business. Okay, so sorry. So uh, no, the teams still have a room to operate. So the teams will actually communicate with the teams, communicate with the business people, understand the business requirements aligned with the security. Okay, so since the GRC team implements a good controls over into the organization, then the people, the team over the organization really feels it's like room to operate. They won't get blocked by these rules. Okay. So another important parallel is responsibilities. In parenting, the goal is to teach the child to understand consequences and take the responsibility for their actions. In GRC, same applies. Teams should own the risk, not hide them or push them into someone else, not to transfer the risk to someone else. Okay. Finally, just like parenting changes as the child grows, GRC must scale with the organization. What works for a startup will not work for a growing enterprise. Controls, policies, governance need to evolve over time. When GRC mirrors a good parenting, something interesting really happens. Security becomes a part of everyday decision instead of last minute checkpoint. Once the incident came up, then it will not handle. So it will behaviorally change. The habitual of security involves in the GRC. Okay. Okay. Now let's connect this parenting mindset directly into ISO 27001 because this is where many organizations struggle. A lot of people approaches ISO 27001 thinking it's a strict rule book or something tells you exactly what to do and how to do it. There is no such kind of thing ISO 27001 says. But if you actually read the standard, you'll notice something interesting. Okay. So ISO 27001 will not really give you direct instructions. The ISO 27001 will not say implement this tool to protect the security, implement this access control techniques to protect your security. It rarely give you a direct instruction. Instead, it keeps asking question: who is responsible for this? What risk have you considered? What did you choose this control instead of another? Okay. So this is very similar to a good parenting. So a good parent doesn't give you answers for every situation. They teach the child how to think, how to assess consequences, and how to make better decisions over time. ISO 27001 works in the same way. It is not a checklist. It is not definitely not an one size fits all the organization, one size that fits all the controls into one annexure. The standard is intentionally flexible because the organization differs in size, business model, technology, and risk exposure. So actually, ISO 27001 really requires a management system to secure the information into the organization. What ISO 27001 really promotes is ownership, accountability, and risk should not be an abstract concept. Someone need to own them. So control should not exist just on paper. We should not create a policies, procedures, and uh, all of this documentations for namesake. They should be applied consistently. The process to secure the business needs to be applied consistently. So another important aspect is consistency. When a security depends on individual, it breaks the ISO 27001 easily. So, ISO 27001 usually pushes organization to build a repeatable processes so the security becomes predictable and reliable. Okay. So, the ISO 27001 strongly emphasizes the continuous improvement. Security is not just one-time implementation thing, something you finish and move on from that. It's not some project that we developed and then move on. It's a continual improvement thing, management system to monitor and continually improve the organization as it grows. Okay. The risk changes and the controls must evolve as the organization grows. Okay. So when you look into the ISO 27001 through a parenting perspective, it becomes a clear that the standard is not trying to control organization, it's trying to prepare them to operate securely, responsibly on their own. That's why ISO 27001 delivers real value only when it is treated as maturity framework, not just certification requirement at all. Okay. So, so if we see ISO 27001 is not a checklist or a rigid rule book. It's not controlling the organization by creating some strict rules. Then the obvious next question is, what does it actually promote, right? The first thing ISO 27001 promoting is ownership and accountability. Risk should never be abstract. Risk should not be identified and then left as it is. Every risk, every control, and every decision must have a clear owner, must have a clear responsibility. Okay, just like parenting, responsibility is gradually transferred. The goal is not supervision forever, but accountability is. Okay, the second thing the standard promotes is risk-based thinking before action. ISO 27001 expects an organization to pass and ask, if we implement this, if we implement that, if we implement new tools, technologies, okay, what could go wrong if we do this? What could be the impact? What could be the business impact? What could be the financial impact? What could be the security impact? Okay, so this doesn't allow the business to slow down. It prevents avoidable mistake and rework later. Okay, another key focus is consistency and repeatable behavior. When security depends only on an individual, it becomes fragile. ISO 27001 pushes organization to build the processes that work in the same way every time, regardless of who is involved. Let's say a core team is taking the whole responsibility, okay, and implementing multiple new processes. The responsibility and the process are getting messed here. So, if the ISO 27001 is implemented very properly, all the processes are already standardized. Let's say if any of the team member leaves, if any of the team uh, uh, core participant is absent for a month or two, the organization business still continues to run. The ISO 27001 promotes it. It identifies the processes, it creates it. Okay. So regardless of who is involved, the processes should continue. And finally, ISO 27001 promotes the continual improvement, just we saw in the last slide. So just like parenting doesn't stop at one stage, security maturity doesn't stop after certification. Risk changes as the organization grows, and the control must evolve within the uh, organization grows. Okay. So when you look at all of this together, ISO 27001 is not to control the organization. It is trying to build the habit of thinking, evaluating, and improving continuously, which is aligned with the security perspective. Okay, that is why organizations treat ISO 27001 as a maturity framework to gain long-term value, while those who treat it as a one-time certification struggles to sustain it. There are multiple small-scale organizations that they have implemented ISO 27001 for namesake and for certification's sake, just why the organization client ask for the certification, they will implement, and then they will struggle to maintain the information security management system when the organization grows. Okay, so let's see. We will think in a perspective of an organization grows from a kid to adult to a mature stage. Okay. Once we understand ISO 27001 is trying to build the next build, okay, the next question becomes how does it looks different at the stage of organization grows. So let's start it by clearly understanding what a kid stage organization looks like. It will have like a uh, people of around 10 to 100 uh, max. Okay, so they will have a small startup. There will be some development team and an engineering team who will handle entire processes of the business. Okay, so core business will be taken by a single or two teams. Let's take this as a scenario. Let's consider that as a kid organization. How an kid organization behaves in the perspective of ISMS, in the perspective of uh, organizational being. Okay, so at this stage, the organization is learning to work. Things move very fast. Okay. Decisions are taken quickly, experiments are happening daily. Let's say engineering teams implement multiple product ideas, they'll try to create. So decisions are taken quickly. The hierarchy is very small since the decisions are making taken quickly. And most of the knowledge lives inside people, not in the processes, not in the documents, not in the teams itself. It resides into the people who's working on that. Okay, so this is also a stage where few key individuals knows everything. If one of them is unavailable, things get slowed down or it will break. Okay, security responsibilities are informal and often shared but rarely defined. Let's say security responsible, I'll say if I'm working in an engineering department, I'm taking care of this development, I'll say this is my responsibility, but I will never know what would be the connected responsibility to it, what would be the security responsibility for the development. Okay, so the responsibility is shared. Okay, often it is informal like that, but it will not be rarely like defined in the programs processes that is involved in developing. Okay, from a cybersecurity perspective, risk exists, but they do not clearly understood and discussed. It is not communicated to the people working with the organization. Data is being handled, systems are exposed, access is shared, but there's a very little structure thinking around what could go wrong. They will never think of what would be the risk, what would be the impact. There will be a lesser thought of doing that. Uh, but at this stage, since a lot of implementation and new technologies are happening, the organization needs to think that way. Security at this stage is almost reactive. Something goes wrong, maybe an outage or a misconfiguration or a data issue, and only then does this organization respond, and then the organization think about the security. Okay, now here is the important part. This stage is not wrong since we are creating a business, we are trying to sell products, we are developing our products. That is the primary focus of the business, right? It brings money into the project, into the organization. Okay, so the problem starts only when the stage continues for too long without a guidance. Here comes the GRC. An unmanaged kid grows into a risky adult, right? That's why exactly where the parenting involves and make a right direction to the kid. Likewise, this is exactly where GRC comes into control, not to audit, but to gently guide them where to go, what's our mission and vision of the organization, how the security is aligned with the business perspective. That is where the GRC comes and guide them to a respective way. Okay. ISO 27001 at this stage is not about controls or certification. It's about building the awareness, understanding what assets are exist, who owns them, and who could really realistically like taking the responsible of the risk. What could go wrong if things continue without a structure? If we in the parenting terms, if we expect a kid stage organization to behave like a mature enterprise, we create resistance. But if we guide them in a properly at this stage, the transition to maturity becomes very smoother. This is the golden period for GRC team to understand the business very clearly. Since the hierarchy is very low, they can easily understand the structure, they can easily structure it to a organization business, to a mission and vision of the organization. It will not deviate it since the hierarchy is so slow, and the transparency to the top management is really very clear. The organization's top management will transparently see what is being implemented, what is there at this stage. Okay, so this is a small infographic to see decisions are not reactive and planned. Security depends on people, not as processes. This is the overview of behavior of an kid size organization. If an organization is in a kid size, these are the realistic sceneries that happens in the organization. Okay, so since we have seen the organization how it behaves when it is very small, let's see what is the GRC focus here. GRC's parenting approach. Okay, so now that we understand how a kid stage organization behaves, a good parenting doesn't overwhelm a child with rules, right? So when we are growing a kid, we should not tell them not to do this strictly. Instead, we need to tell them what could go wrong if you do this. If we follow the same approach into the organization, okay, the organization will be guided. It's not like control it. The organization business function, it is not slowed down. Okay. So in GRC terms, this means very basic governance. Someone should clearly own systems, data, and decision. This doesn't require committees or complex structures, just clarity. This the next focus of this kid-sized organization is to aware the people, give the awareness to the people. The teams doesn't need a detailed risk register at this stage. The teams doesn't need to know the detailed risk register, how it is created. They don't need it, but they must understand obvious risk of their department. If the department, like an engineering department or any of the department that is involved in the ISMS scope, is handling some of the mm, operations or activities, they must know what could be the risk if a HR is handling some PAI, if they are not stored it in a very secure place, if it is going outside, if it is storing in a personal devices. The HR department people know what kind of risk the PAI leakage will get into. These kind of thinking, this kind of clarity the organization should have, like a small kind of kit based organization, kit faces organization should have the clear understanding of risk, what could go wrong. That clarity they need to have. Let's say uh, but like a data exposure, access misuse, and service outages that could happen, the organization departments will be aware. The organization departments shall be aware of the security issues. Let's say control to implement and to restrict these data exposures and access misuse and service outages. So when implementing these control in a kit-sized organization, it should be very minimal, but it should be very effective. We need to assess the organization as organization risk based on the count of data, value of the data that is handled into the organization, and we need to think accordingly which security control can be placed here. It can be an expensive tooling, or it can be a simple monitoring, just a manual process. But the organization control implementation should be effective. It need not to be an very um, expensive thing. Okay, but it should be effective. Simple things like access control, backup logging, backups, and logging at a basic level, and a secure configuration practices can be implemented. Okay, these controls should help teams not to slow them down, but what we must consciously avoid is heavy documentation. Okay, at this kid stage organization, if we bring them lot of policies, procedures, and a lot of documents we created, like a 10 pages, 20 pages of documentation, and communicate it to the departments that you should follow the strict rules and things. They won't follow. Either they will leave the organization, or they will just find a way to bypass it. Okay. Over-engineered security solutions at this stage often leads to as workarounds and bypasses, which actually increases the 27001 risk. ISMS risk fully supports this approach. Okay. So the organization actually needs to design control based on the context and the maturity of an organization. Okay, the standard doesn't force complexity where it is not needed. If the control is very minimal and if it is very mandatory, then the controls can be implemented. The goals of the GRC at this small sized organization at the kid stage is not a compliance. The goal is to build the right habits so that the organization is ready to grow into the next stage. It will get the adolescence, and then it will get into the mature stage. In that meanwhile, the organization get its habitual uh, security processes. Okay, so let's we think on ISO 27001 perspective, how we can actually apply it at the kid stage organization. Okay, at this stage, ISO starts by asking some simple question: what information actually matters? Let's say not everything, only critical assets. Let's say some critical assets and critical mm, techniques or technologies are handled inside a small scale organization. Then, as in the perspective of ISMS, we need to ask a question: what are all the critical assets that is involved here? What are all the critical technologies, techniques that is involved here? Okay, so this could be a customer data, authentication credentials, or a source code which is being developed. Okay, this can be anything. The goal is focus, not to completeness. The goal is to create a basic minimal risk assessment, risk understanding, and then we create a security controls based on the risk that we have identified. Okay, so once the assets are identified, uh, the 27001 ISMS expects basic ownership. If you identify an asset, then define a ownership to it. If any critical assets are identified, we need to properly give a responsibility for any of the people. We need to define the ownership. Okay, someone must be responsible at this stage. Roles don't have to be very formal or documented manner, something like that, in detail, but accountability must exist. If you take that critical asset and see, you need to easily understand that this team, this person is responsible. They are having the accountability over it. The responsible person should have a clear understanding of what this critical asset is, what kind of risk that can bring into the organization. Okay, risk thinking here is intentionally simple. We just need to think in the perspective of what risk that it brings into the organization. Okay, the critical assets bringing into the organization. So after that, we can implement the minimal controls, but it should be effective. Let's say simple access controls for those critical assets. Let's say we'll define a critical assets in a very simpler manner. Let's say if 10 people are working on the critical assets on a tool or a product, okay, then we'll just minimize the access. We just control the access. That's it. We don't need to implement. a lot of toolings, lot of security controls to manage the access, automate the access. It's not needed in the kid-sized organization, but it should be effective. If 10 people is required to access the product, access the code, then just simpler 10 people can be provided the access. Okay. So this kind of simple, effective implementation we can take in the perspective of a kid-sized organization. Another important aspect is management involvement. Let's say whatever can be done from GRC side, it is very easy to make it transparent to the top management. Here we can easily bring these identified assets, identified risk, and identified organizations' perspective to the top management in the perspective of ISMS, Information Security Management System. And then we will make the leadership aware that we have this much of assets, we have this much of impact, risk that would bring impact to our business. The top management shall have a ownership on what to do next, how we can implement controls to stop that impact. Okay. So when the leadership asks the right question, teams naturally start thinking about the security. Okay. So let's see a scenario based thing. We'll take an organization like a very fast growing startup with a small engineering team where they will handling like customer data and then deploying changes frequently and relying on the individual expertise. Let's say if an engineering team person is working on some development, it will rely on some individual expertise rather than some development processes, some secure development processes rather than formal process handling. Will rely on the individual expertise. So this is the scenario in this startup. The first mistake would be trying to implement ISO 27001 as a full program. Okay, this is not goal at this stage. It's a very small organization. It's not a goal at this stage. So ISO 27001 should not use as guiding framework. The first step is to identify the asset. We need to identify the assets. Okay, if we take this scenario, we need to identify what are all the development tools that we are been using. What are all the servers that is involved in development, what are the cloud service that we are using. So these kind of asset identification we at least need to do. Sit with the engineering team and ask simple question: what information would hurt the business the most if it was leaked or lost or unavailable or not available at the time it requires? Okay, usually the answer is very small. They will just simply respond to us that the credentials or the source code or some customer data. Okay, that's where you start. That's your starting point. You need to identify the critical assets that can be in information, that can be in physical assets, that can be in tools, softwares, that can be in people as well. Okay, so the second step is basic ownership. So once we identify these critical assets, then we need to give the basic ownership for it. Okay, for each critical assets, let's say we have a cloud service provider. If any team people is having a ownership on that, or if they don't, even if they don't have a ownership on that, we just need to create that cloud team. In the development team, cloud development guy is responsible for this. He needs to have this ownership against it. Anything happens, then any incident or any breach or something happens, the ownership should be directly goes to the individual that we have assigned. So like that, likewise, we need to assign a basic ownership for the each critical assets that we have identified. Okay, this is not just a like we don't need to create a RASI matrix in a very detailed stage at this starting point. Instead, we can just assign ownership. Okay, we can just define policies, but not too deep. Okay, since the organization is very small, they are into the engineering team. They will have their own own work. They will not be able to create the processes as it develops. Okay, we need to create policies, how to define these SOPs, how to define these procedures or processes. The organization eventually will grow. The team working on the engine products and critical assets will start working on identifying the incidents, identifying the risk and how it can be mitigated, and then they will document it in a procedural way. Okay, so the third step is like risk discussion, right? Obviously. So we will not create a complex risk register here. We don't need to create a ISO 27001 based templates. We'll get it from online. We don't need to create it very realistically, like very uh, complexly. We just need to identify and document it in the risk register. The ISO 27001 doesn't give you a format to identify the risk, or doesn't give you a format to record this risk in a very detailed way. It says that your department or your organization risk has been identified. How you did the assessment, how the management of the risk, how the treatment of the risk is decided. That is what simply needed. We just don't need to make a very complex GRC here. We can simply create a risk documentation over here. Okay. Uh, the last step to implement the SMS here is like, once we identify critical assets and then we identify risk based out of it, and then mm, what we need to do, we just need to implement some security controls to avoid the risk, or to uh, minimize the risk, or to reduce the impact of the risk. This is some um, minor things that we need to think of. The control implementation, again, we just don't need to take the business perspective, like take the GRC perspective in a mature way. We don't need to implement a lot of security toolings to logging and monitoring. We will buy one security tool to logging and monitoring, and then we'll buy one security tool to manage the project management tooling. It's not like that. We'll just need to create a procedure for that. How we are doing, we'll just manually create it first, and then we'll move to the tooling and automation as the organization grows. Okay. And then the final thing is, management involvement is very critical. At this stage, management will always know, since our organization is developing, our revenue is this much, our profit percentage is this much, how much can we give it to the security? Okay. With that, the security should be effective. It should be cost effective as well. The team, GRC team, who is implementing ISMS in the organization, should think our organization level is very small. Our organization data handling is very minimal. So what manual process without tooling, what a manual security controls that can be placed here. The GRC team will comes into picture here. They will think on that. They will implement the security controls very minimal as required, as this is complying the 27001. Okay, let's see. Let's now see the organization grows into an adult. Let's say the organization is getting maturity, like it is getting adolescence. Let's say the organization grows from 10 to 100 people organization to a 500 to 1000 people organization or more. Okay, let's see. When an organization becoming an adult, uh, this is the phase where growth starts to show its side effects. Okay, the organization has more people now. It's not like some small hierarchy like a kid organization. It's not like some small system assets, some small number of assets that is easy to handle. Now the organization starts to grow. It's hitting adolescence. So now the organization will have more systems, more data coming in, multiple teams working in a parallel way. Okay. So decision making is no longer a centralized one. Okay. So the team itself directly thinks on what uh, is needed to complete this project. So the decision making will not go into the uh, management or a accountable person. The team will directly think on what to be done and they will do it. This is how an adolescence, a risky adult grows. Okay, that's how an organization will also grow. What is needed here? Different teams take different decisions independently, often with a good intention. They will not think it in a very bad way to reduce the impact of the business. They will try to make it in a good way, but it is not accountable by the responsible person, right? So, other behavior of these kind of adult organization is like not having a individual ownership. They will try to fix the issues quickly. If any issues rise, since the hierarchy is very low, since the connection to the people is very strong, they will simply go and ask the people, directly get accesses, directly implement whatever is needed for the project to complete. Okay. From a cybersecurity perspective, this is where complexity increases significantly. Data flows across the teams and systems. Access is granted more frequently. Okay. If any cloud services created or hosted or implemented into some kind of development, then the access provision and access decommission, everything is not centralized. The team will decide what access to be provided to whom. They will implement those accesses and everything. Okay. So security practices become very inconsistent. One team may follow good practices, another may not. Incidents starts to repeat, not because people are careless, but because the organization lacks its structure. The structured process, the standardized way how to do aligned with the security is not there when the organization grows. Okay. The stage is very similar to adulthood in human. Independence increases since the people are growing, the teams are growing, there will be no visible accountability. They will take decisions independently. But the responsibility will also goes with the people along with the people. Okay, without a structure, mistake becomes really costly. If they are not aware about the rules that has been placed, the legal team is not centralized and guide the application development team on the legal perspective, then there will be a legal penalties the development could get. Let's say that if any team is developing some sites that breaches the legal requirement, then obviously the legal penalty will come in, right? Why this happening? This is because the centralized accountability is not there. The organization development team will take their own responsibility. So this is how an organization which is hitting the adolescence, which is growing in very fastly, will face these kind of issues. Okay. This is the organization where, sorry, this is the organization where usually feels pain, audit pressure, customer questions. They will ask how secure your data is that we are sharing with you. Regulatory expectations, again, as I said, the legal requirements and the regulatory requirements, if we are into some regulated entities, and or repeated security incidents or issues that could happen. Okay. And this is exactly where GRC is very critical. At the adult stage, speed alone is no longer enough. Structure is very mandatory one. It is not optional anymore. It is required for survival and then sustainable growth. If the organization needs to achieve maturity in a very good way, then the GRC needs to make it in a structured way. Okay, this is some seeing what could happen in a uh, rapidly growing organization. These are the teams facing complexity, no shared directions. There will be mission and vision for each teams. There will be no centralized management here. Okay, and then the paper complaints. We'll create security checklist. We'll do everything, but still triggers by incidents. And then we'll think on implementing other controls. And then there will be multiple documentation as it grows. There will not be an really centralized documentation. Development team will have multiple people. Development team will have multiple small subdivisions, sub departments. They will develop some what to say different sections of a application or product. They will create their own documentation. As then the documentation gets overloaded. There is not, since there is no structured way, since there is no centralized visibility to the development team, the documentation works, it will be overloaded. And then reputation, let's say an department is like handled with a security incident. If the organization is not like centralized, okay, if the team is handling the security incident alone, then it is not being communicated to the other teams, it is not being communicated to the organization. Then what happens? The same security issues repeats. That's how an behavior of an adult stage organization, when it grows rapidly, these kind of issues that the organization will face. Okay, so what we need to do here in a GRC focus, what GRC will do. Okay, uh, once the organization reaches its adult state, GRC has to change its behavior as well as a parenting structure. A parenting dealing with an adult doesn't control every decision, right? So since when we are kid, our parents always say do this, do that, but we need to think that what should be done here. When we grow like a adult, then our parents stop restricting us, stop telling us which is right or wrong. Okay, but they will, uh, but they do expect responsibilities and accountabilities from us. In GRC terms, this is where structure becomes essential. The goal is not to slow down, okay, slow the teams down, but to make sure they all operate within a common direction. The mission and vision of an organization aligned with the security is achieved or not. That's what the GRC will think of. The first thing GRC should focus on is defining roles and ownership at this stage. Responsibilities cannot remain informal. Okay, every system, data sets, and major processes should have a clear ownership. Here, we need to develop a clear documentation. Not like how we did in the earlier stage of our organization, like a kid stage. Here we need to define the already understood. Let's say we are implementing an ISMS into a kid organization and then converting it into adult organization. Okay, here what we'll do, we don't need to follow the same as the kid organization. Here the GRC's thinking should be changed, since there is multiple departments, multiple people, and lot of big data are coming in and managed into the organization. Then the organization way of thinking into the GRC should also change. The roles and responsibilities shall be clearly defined here. It should not be this people individual is handling. Here it comes like the designation. This security manager should handle the security incident. The accountability should be given to the security manager, and then security engineer should take the responsibility and inform it to the accountable person. Likewise, we need to create a defined roles and responsibilities here. Okay, every system, data sets, and a major process should have a clear ownership, and then should have a clear processes. Next is standardization. This doesn't mean creating policies for everything. This doesn't mean creating procedures for everything. It means standardizing the most critical security and risk processes and access management. Let's say, let's say we are making access management, change management, incident handling, and then risk assessment into an organization. In this adult stage, the organization is getting matured. This stage, rapid growth happens, right? This stage, we need to clearly focus on the access management and change management. There will be a lot of changes will happen into the products, into the processes, into the peoples. A lot of changes happen. Then how we are managing it? What are all the changes that we are focusing on? What are all the procedures to change a process or a people or a technology? That should be very clear. Even though we are not following it in a very right way, but we need to have a very clear uh, processes defined, since we are trying to achieve the maturity. Okay, so control should start shifting from reactive. See, whenever it happens, we don't need to we will implement control, right? In this stage, in this adult kind of stage, when the organization grows rapidly, we should not think like that. We should think it in a very preventive way. We should think the possibilities what may happen, and then we'll implement controls accordingly. Okay. Instead of fixing the issues after they occur, the organization should focus on preventing common failures through the consistent practices. At the same stage, GRC must carefully balance agility and control. Too much of control will frustrate the team and create workarounds. Okay, they will think what to do if they are blocking it. What can be done here without this control? They will think of the workarounds. Too little control will result in repeated incident and audit findings. Let's say if we are not implementing a secure control towards an security incident, then it will repeat, obviously, right? So the balance is the hardest part here in the GRC team. Okay, it requires the team to understand the business deeply, not just standard like ISO 27001 requirements and implement the same controls to the business. It's not like that. The GRC team needs to understand it very clearly what the business is, what the requirement of the business impact is, and what kind of controls from ISO 27001 can be implemented here? We can think on lot of the different standards. It's not only about ISO 27001 standards. If you are thinking of managing access control, if you check on the ISO 27001, the access control management is really very minimal. They will tell who is responsible for managing access. The ISO 27001 tells to create as a policy in a structured way to make rules on how to provide the access, how to give the least access, but it doesn't technically says what can be implemented. Okay, here GRC team will have a team discussions with the IT team or a related team to make a really workable access control management. Okay, they can implement NIST standards. They can implement any of the access control specific regulatory frameworks. Okay, but this is needed. This to make a effective management here. Okay. So, from a training perspective, the key learning here is GRC at the adult stage is about creating structures that scales, not rules that restricts. Okay. So, let's say we will take the ISO 27001 directly into the adult stage perspective, and then we'll take a scenario to discuss. Okay, so at this point the organization has grown beyond the informal habits. Multiple team exists, multiple processes exist, systems are interconnected, multiple systems are there, multiple locations can also be there, that networks are interconnected, and security incidents or audit questions are starting to repeat. If any security incidents are happening, since the organization is developing, like growing into a multiple location organization, multiple department organization, then the obvious next thing is there will be a lot of technologies involved, lot of assets involved, there will be n number of security incidents that can repeat. Okay, so the first ISO concept that becomes very critical here is the scope definition. We need to identify very clearly. See, unlike the kid stage where we focused on only on critical assets, the adult stage requires a clearly defined ISMS scope. The scope should be aligned with business, operations, and risk, and real risk exposure, not everything, but too narrow either. Okay. So the second step is just formalizing the roles and responsibilities. Ownership can no longer be informal. ISO accepts uh, a defined accountability, who approves access, who manages incidents, who own risk. That's it. Simple, but it should be effective. Okay. Next comes the structured risk assessment. This is the key shift here. Instead of informal discussion, the organization now documents its risk in a consistent way. There should be a centralized risk management system. Every organization's department shall follow the risk management system that is developed and centrally enforced. Okay, so fixing problems repeatedly, standardizing the controls needs to be implemented. Uh, let's say access controls, uh, management processes, change management processes, um, controls implementation process, like new control implementation process, logging and monitoring, and then incident response procedures. These things we need to clearly focus on this stage. Okay, when the organization grows, we need to really define and implement it from a central perspective, since there will be a lot of big departments. Okay, like n number of departments. Every process and procedure handling from the department shall integrate into the central policies and central procedures. Okay, there can be a department specific SOPs, department specific business operations policies, but uh, a major security management shall come from central top management. Okay, so another important change here is the introduction of internal audits and management reviews. Okay, so what we'll see from the internal audits and management review is not finding a problem, not finding an issue within the internal audit when we conduct it. Okay, and identifying the internal audit non-conformities and complaining it to the management that this team is not following. We should not think on that perspective. Here we need to think on what could really gone wrong, what have we missed to implement in the security perspective. We'll find out through the internal audit. We will let the management know we have missed to implement the security controls. We need to fix it now. What would be the management review, like management opinion on that? We need to get the transparency from the management. We need to get the controls needs to be implemented for the gaps identified that in the internal audit. Okay, so we'll take the scenario: an organization grows like multiple teams and multiple customers facing audit requests, recurring security issues and incidents regularly. Okay, regulatory expectations regularly. Okay, sorry. Yes, sorry, I missed the slide. Yes. So, yeah, here, since we are taking a scenario where an organization is growing with the multiple teams, uh, with the new customers, lot of customers expecting audit requests, having recurring security issues, and increasing regulatory expectation. So, what as ISO 27001 request, what from ISO 27001 perspective we need to do is first thing we need to centralize everything. Okay, we should not make independent control decision making. Instead, the GRC team and ISO 27001 expecting is we need to centralize everything. We need to create a top level policies first, and then we need to communicate it with the department peoples, where the department people should understand the ISMS requirements, information security management system requirements, and then they need to think on their own development perspective, their own process perspective. What can be done here from the risk management perspective, from the control implementation perspective? If they are not aware of what to be done, they will reach out to the central team. Since the organization's policy is this, organization mission and vision is this, the product that we are developing is deviating from the mission and vision, is deviating from the organization policy. What can be done here? Shall we consider this as a risk? If it is, then how we are going to mitigate it, how we are treating this risk? These kind of centralized management policies will help the sub teams, sub departments to identify their work processes and then identify the organization to again get back into the mission and vision direction, into the mission and vision. Let's slow this down and really learn from the scenario, because this is where the most organization in the real world are today. Okay, most of the organizations are fall under this. Okay, imagine an organization that has grown steadily over the last few years. Okay, it has now multiple teams: engineering, operations, supports, maybe even sales and complaints. These departments they have. Customers are increasing, data volumes are growing, systems are more interconnected than before. At this stage, security issues is like no longer random. The same type of problems keep appearing. Okay, access issues, configuration gaps, audit observations, customer security questionnaires. These will get repeated since we have a lot of customers. Okay, the repetition is a signal. This repetition is a signal. It tells us individual efforts is no longer enough. The organization needs a structure, needs a standardized process, procedures to be followed to manage our direction towards our mission and vision. Okay. From a training perspective, the first thing the organization needs to do is scope thinking. Instead of trying to secure everything, every department, we need to understand what is falling under the scope of ISMS. ISO 27001 asks you clearly define what part of business that ISMS will cover. Okay, practically, this means identifying which teams, systems, and processes are critical to delivering the service and handling sensitive data. Okay, so the scope must reflect the business reality. So since we talk about mission and vision, the scope must reflect the business reality. If any of the teams apart from this business requirement, or is the where the information is not stored or secured or processed, then we don't need to complex that by adding those businesses into our scope. Okay. So the second learning point from this is to make a formal ownership as we define it in a uh, kid stage organization. We'll just simply tell them that uh, this asset is owned by this team, this people, like that. Here, what we need to do, we need to create a formal ownership. We can create a ownership documentation. We can create a register along with that. Since we will have a asset inventory, asset management system, right? So there we will provide what assets are being has been owned by whom. Like that, we need to create a register over it. Okay. An organization which is becoming an adult, informing ownership creates a confusion. ISO 27001 expects roles to be defined. Who owns the risk? Who approves the access? Who respond to the incidents? Let's say if a department is developing any products, okay, then the department should have a person need to do a risk assessment before implementing a product, okay, before creating a product. They need to think, if we launch this product, what could be the threat, what could be the impact that brings inside the organization. What can that product, will that product deviate from our mission and vision? These things needs to be thought before developing it. So these kind of formal roles and responsibilities shall be defined under departments, under the organizations as well. Okay, this doesn't mean bureaucracy, that it means clarity. The clarity of people, roles and responsibilities shall be defined. Okay, the most important learning here is structured risk assessment process. The organization will have a separate risk management in a top level, whereas the consisting department will have a consecutive department will have a separate risk assessment planning based on their uh, teams or scenarios involved in the development processes. Let's take a development team will have a multiple software development risk. There will be a tooling risk. There will be a language oriented risk. If they are developing it into a C++ or some different languages, and since the Python is developing, then the development team wants to switch it from the C++ to Python. There could be a practical risk. The software development team will know the perspective of changing it. What could be a risk if we move it from the C++ to Python? So these kind of risk specific to the team shall be figured out by the specific team. It shall be followed by the central risk management team, how the risk assessment is followed, but it has to be considered from the specific manner how it has been created. Okay. This is how organization moves from opinion-based security to the decision-based security. Decisions shall not be made just within the discussion that we had. Decisions shall be made with the data that we have for the past 6 months. What happened in last 6 months? We'll have a data. We'll see the trend, and then we'll work on the maturity model. Okay. The next thing is control standardization. Instead of each team implementing security differently, it encourages a common process. As we already discussed, the same access management, change management, logging and monitoring shall not be independent. It shall be a centralized management. There should be a team who is having accountability over it, responsibility over it. The team should responsibly provide the accesses, responsibly revoke the accesses as it is. Okay. So these controls are preventive. They are reducing the repeated mistakes. So since any of the smaller department face any security incident, then the team identifies the root cause. What they will do, they will communicate it to the entire organization. Since we are communicating it, then the root cause will be solved by implementing a corrective action, right? So then the corrective action can be implemented centrally. The risk that has been identified can be communicated centrally. Okay. And then all the interdependent teams will identify whether this scenario is happening in our department. They will think on that perspective since it is communicated to them. If it is, then they will apply the same corrective action here as well. So the repeatable incidents will not happen. The repeatable mistakes will not happen. Okay. Another key learning point at this stage is internal review. The organization needs to do the internal audits and the management reviews uh, early, at least early or 6 months once. There they need to understand the requirements of the business and the risk they already have and the newly risk that the organization bring upon. They will find the gaps, or they will try to improve the organization's department. They will identify all the gaps in the management review meeting. They will just share it with the uh, management to let them know that these risks are still we have identified. So these risks can be taken into action. So then the management approves the budget, approves the security control plan. Then the team will implement the security controls and the organization grows continually. Okay, let's take how a mature organization behaves. So, okay, this is the final slide, final part of our session. I don't need to take your time more. It's since already 1.5 hours. Okay, let's see an mature organization, how a mature organization behave. Okay, uh, let's say the matured organization, this is the stage where GRC is done its job very well. Okay, they have already identified the critical assets in a basic stage, and then they have already implemented a central management system to manage the information security in the adult stage. Okay, now what they'll do, they will just step out from the job. Not stepping out doesn't mean like they will not do the duty. What they'll do, they will monitor and they will let the ownership takes the accountability and responsibility here. Okay, security is no longer a separate function that people remember only during the audits or incidents. Incidents in a matured organization, decisions are made with a risk in mind. Leaders don't ask, "Is this complaint?" They ask, "Why what is the risk here, and is it acceptable?" Security and GRC are embedded into daily work since the processes are already developed in the adult stage of the organization. Team don't wait for approvals at the last moment. They already understand the boundaries within which they are. So what they'll do, they already habitual of asking the access before implementing it. They will think on what needs to be done when the access should be raised, access request should be raised. They know it, they will do it. So this is how a behavior of a matured organization looks like. So roles and responsibilities and everything will be clearly defined. Everybody, every team members and team heads will know what is the process here if you want to do this. Okay. So the policies, the procedures, and the documentations and the roles and responsibilities are clearly defined. If you need this access, reach out to this team, raise the request to this mail ID. Everything should be clearly communicated. That's how a mature organization behaves. Okay, let's say this is some infographic thing. How the decisions are risk informed and the data driven. Risks are anticipated, like not just reacted to once it happened. Okay, incident managed through prepared processes, procedures, and then security and GRC are embedded into daily operations. Okay, roles and responsibilities processes are very stable here. Okay, everybody knows, everybody is communicated what roles and responsibilities are there. Okay, this is just a small infographic how mature organizations behave. Okay, so as the at the mature stage, something very important happens. GRC actually step back, as I told in the earlier slide. GRC step back. That doesn't mean GRC becomes an inactive team. It means that role changes from enforcement to advisory. They will stay in the top level and monitors everything very carefully. If something is deviated, if something where the organization struggles, GRC comes in, help the team to again direct it into the vision and vision of the organization. Okay, think about parenting again. When a child grows into a responsible adult, okay, a good parent doesn't disappear, but they also don't interfere in every decision. They will not come into the control establishment, control implementation, but they also don't they guide only when it is needed. In a mature organization, GRC works in the same way. Instead of asking the teams to follow rules, GRC helps the leadership understand the risk trade-off and the supports information decision making. Okay, another key shift at this stage is optimization. The focus is no longer on adding more controls. In fact, adding unnecessary controls at this stage can reduce the efficiency. Okay, mature GRC looks at existing controls and asks, are the controls are effective? Are they still relevant to our business? Are they still relevant uh, to our security? So can anything can be simplified or automated? What can be done from our side in the GRC perspective? Okay, metrics become extremely important here. GRC uses data, incident trends, control effectiveness, audit outcomes to guide the improvements. They will not again take decisions based on the discussions and the opinions. What they'll do, they will get the trends, they will get the incident details, they will get the control effectiveness, complaints assessment reports from the past 6 months, audit outcomes from the past 6 months. What they will do, they will take all this data and identify what where the organization struggles and what can be implemented to improve the complaints. Okay, so that's how a matured organization feels and matured organization do. Okay, the focus also shifts strongly towards the resilience. The organization accepts that incidents will happen, but it prepares for to respond and recover and learn quickly. Okay, just as important as what GRC avoids at this stage, micromanagement actually kills trust. Here, when the GRC steps back, they should not get in again and they should not do micromanagement to the each control they have implemented. Policy sprawl, like creating multiple policies in the same context, will make confusions. Audit-driven fear pushes problems underground. Like uh, if the behavior is not there, if the habitual practices is not there, then obviously the audit driven fear will come in. Okay, so mature GRC actually avoids all of this from the above, uh, what we have discussed. From a training perspective, what we need to learn, what key learning this that we have is, at maturity, GRC is not about control, it's about confidence. The organization does not depends on GRC to tell what to do. It depends on GRC to help it decide wisely. The departments over here will just ask the GRC to advise on the development, whether we are going in a direction where we are achieving our mission and vision, where the security is aligned with the mission and mission. That's it. Okay. So let's take a ISO 27001 scenario here. How the ISO 27001 works in the matured organization. Okay. And we'll followed by that, we'll take a scenario and we'll discuss on that. Okay. Uh, at this stage, ISO 27001 is no longer treated as a project or a certification requirement. It operates as a living management system that supports the business decisions every day. Okay. The ISMS is embedded into everyday's operation. New systems are introduced when the new vendors are onboarded. When the new business model changes, the risk is naturally considered as part of the decision. They will reactively, not reactively, they will preventively do the risk assessment. They will preventively think what could go wrong, what will happen if the uh, new technologies has been implemented. The implementations, risk assessment strategies are habitually grown into the matured organization, so they know what to be done if any new business model changes or vendors are onboarded or uh, new systems are introduced. Because there has been a defined processes and policies and procedures are there that will be followed by the departments as well. Okay, risk treatments at this stage is continuous. The organization doesn't wait for annual risk assessment. Risks are reviewed and refined and adjusted as the environment changes. Controls are not just judged by where they exist, but whether they effectively plays in a metric role. Like the key metrics are like playing in a key role here. The, let's say, the incident trends, control performance, audit outcome. Uh, so the response time of the incidents once it happens. So these metrics has been considered very seriously here. All the trends will be recorded and that can be used to improve the system that is already present into the organization. Okay, automations here will play a major role. since the organization will have 1,000 plus employees, not manual monitoring is possible. Since wherever possible, the automation of logging and monitoring, incident identification, everything will be implemented here. So when we are doing that, what we'll do, we'll just get the reports from the tools, and then we'll just, based on the report, we'll create a uh, management review meeting, and report it to the management to understand what's the management decision towards the identified trends, identified problems that has been happened only by the data that has been identified for the past 6 months or biannually. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll just read out the scenario. Let's take the scenario as a well established organization operates across multiple teams, regions, and consistently meeting the customer regulatory and audit expectations while using the risk data to guide the strategic decisions. Okay, so now you can have a clear idea on how the kid size organization thinks on, and how a mid-range organization, adult-based organization thinks on, and how a mature organization thinks on the ISMS perspective. Here, see, the expectations has been identified clearly, and the risk data is used to guide the strategic decision, not just assumption or opinions playing here. Okay, so what we'll do here, ISO 27001 says, imagine an organization that has been operating for several years. It has multiple teams, possibly in a multiple location. Okay, so at this stage, security is no longer a separate activity. No one is doing ISO work. No one is going to implement something to secure controls from ISO 27001 perspective. What they will do, they will think on their own. The department owns the risk. The department creates security controls, and the implemented security controls are implemented and informed before the implementation to the central team. Central team will have accountability, and the departments will have a clear responsibility what to be implemented, how to be implemented, and how to monitor it. Okay, and the same shall be informed to the compliance GRC team, and the GRC team will have the accountability of the risk of the entire organization. They will do the monitoring work. Here, the ISO work will not be created and done from the ISO GRC perspective. Okay, so uh, for example, when a new product future is planned, okay, or a new vendor is onboarded, the first question is not, will this pass the audit from a mature organization? What the question will be is, what risk does it introduce, and are we comfortable with it? Will that bring any major impact to the organization? These are the perspectives that a mature organization will think of. Okay, that one question actually will tell you whether the organization is mature or not. Okay, they will think, if the organization is thinking before implementing something, they are in a right stage. The security is already aligned with all the process and procedures. Okay, so let's think on ISO 27001, how it is operating here. Okay, the ISMS is not treated as a documentation; it functions as a management system. Risk assessments and updated when there is a change. Okay, changes are managed and changes are recorded. If in case, if in future, if similar kind of changes happens, if the change happened in the previous time caused any issues, then those shall be recorded in our register, change register. Then this shall not be repeated when implementing a new control. Likewise, the organization uses the previous data to study from the mistakes, and then stop the repeated mistakes in the future. That's how an ISO 27001 needs to be implemented in a phase-wise organization. When it is a small scaled, when it is a mid-scaled, when it is a matured organization, it doesn't only depends on the number of people working. It depends on the organization operations as well. How the operations and businesses are getting in, what kind of mm, technologies and procedures and processes are involving. Depend on that, the organization can be considered whether it is a matured one, whether it is the mid-range or a kid-sized organization. It always depends on the implementation effectiveness of the organization. Okay, Fine. I think, I hope we have just gone through this three phases. Before we move into a question, just one quick wrap up. GRC and ISO 27001 work best when they grow within the organization. From a guidance to structure to confidence, the key is to rush maturity, but not to apply the uh, less level of controls or at the wrong stage. Okay, the key is to rush the maturity, but to apply the right level of control at the right stage. With that in mind, I'm very happy to take questions from you. If you have any queries or questions with this, you can have a questions here. I'm very happy to take.
So, Sudarshan, there are a few questions on the chat box. Uh,
Yes.
can you just,
Let me just
yeah. Till then, I request all the participants, if you have any doubts or questions that you want to ask, please drop them in the chat box. However, if you want to ask him on a one-on-one basis, you can always request to unmute yourselves.
Yes. Answering to Amisha Rani's question, how should we implement ISO 27001 standard, which is in a adult size but are located in a various location, different lands of legals, how to bring uniformity in that case. For example, if four different kid organization have ISO certification but becomes one adult organization now, what should be our approach to bring it one certification for one organization now? Okay, that's a really good query, Mishahid. So, what we prioritize is we need to make a centralized management system. We need to cater out what are all the requirements and what are all the business that are common in the four organization, four kid-sized organization, and make a centralized process over it. And then once we identify the centralized processes, what we need to do, we will uh, create and define the rules and criteria, which is like aligned with the mission and vision of the one central organization, one central adult sized organization, right? What we do, we'll create policies and procedures and criteria that is aligning with our mission and vision. And then the all kid sized organization will follow the policies and procedures of a central stage organization to uh, align with the business objectives and mission and vision, which is aligned with the security. Let's say we have four kid-sized organization will have a four different risk management processes. Okay, what we do here, we'll create a centralized risk management process. We'll communicate it to the team. Okay, we'll communicate it to the entire four organization, kid-sized organization. The kid-sized organization will start following the centralized risk management to let to let the risk assessment done from each of the small sized organization, and then share the risk register with the centralized team. So here what we are identifying, we the centralized adult sized organization will transparently see what kind of risk that has been identified in the four different four kid-sized organization which is operating in a different location. There can be a different localization risk may identified. So let's say if some organization it is in a very sunny area, if it is in a very rainy area, if it is in a very uh, some different locality. So there will be some different kind of power generation, power requirements are there, and it depends on some of the requirements based on the locality, right? So once these are being understood by the four organization and then reported to the central organization, like central adult sized organization, the central adult sized organization will transparently see what is the requirement based on the locality. Okay, if the organization size is very small in a different location and a very big in a other location, then they will think of what would be the security requirement, what would be the physical security requirement, what would be the uh, uh, technical security requirement, and how the top management will think is they will try to integrate all four into one organization. If they have a headquarters, they will bring all the servers to the one organization. They will standardize the access control procedure, and then these accesses shall be shared to a single department. If any adult sized organization have a centralized IT team, they will have a register of access provision. They will provide the access to each of the locations, and the people getting access will not be aware of the registers, but the central team will have the uh, register of what access has been provided, what needs to be revoked at which time. These things can be transparently visible. So that should be done from and for kit-based organization changing into a very big organization. We need to centralize the things. We need to plan the general. We need to cater the general requirements of the four organization, and then we need to make a policies and procedures into one subset, and then we need to communicate it to the all the locations to do it. Okay, so I think I have answered to your question. If you have any queries to it, you can ask in the chat box. Next to Swapnika Jamini, if an organization of 200, one of the department is ISO and SOC 2 complaint. Now their requirement is to make other department complaint as well and merge the ISO and SOC 2 complaint for all the departments and as in one organization is complaint. How to approach this? How to proceed towards merging? Yes, let's say we first need to understand the business scope. We first need to understand the information security management system scope. What kind of information that is getting into the organization? What kind of what are the all the departments that is handling those data, handling those information, how they are processing, how securely it is processed. We need to first identify that, and then if we want to bring other departments from the organization, then we need to think on a risk perspective. What could be the risk that can be came in from the department? Okay, we need to think on the perspective of the department. Perspective of the process, what the department is handling, what the activities, what the department is handling. We need to think on a risk based perspective, and then we need to centralize the SOC 2 and the ISO 27001 policies into the organization. And if the department, if one single department is complained, then the policies of ISO 27001 and SOC 2s are all will be there, right? The centralized team need to take it and then share it to the different teams, that this is what we are following for this department. The other departments also need to follow the same policies and procedure. If any tweaking kind of thing needs to be there, any changes needs to be done from the let's say from the other department's perspective, then the central team needs to sit with the team and understand the requirements of the changes. And then if it can be done, then the central team needs to do it in the central policies and procedure and share it across the team. Okay, that is how, and that is the good approach how an organization think to merge into one. And yes, we can replicate policies of one department to others, but it depends on the business requirements. That's why we are doing this assessment. We need to do this assessment that if any of the department's activities and processes involved in is not relevant to the policies that we have created, or maybe it can add more details to the policies that we have already created, then we need to sit with the teams. Then we need to create like tweak our policy little more, that is very central kind of thing. Okay, let's think. Mm, let's think. The organization, a department is in a development a department. Okay, so development department which got ISO and SOC 2. Okay, when you take the HR processes, HR departments, human resource department, the entire activities and processes are different. We cannot replicate those just development policies into human resource department, right? There, what we need to do, how the access has been provided, how the access control is managed in the software development is different, and how the access has been managed in the HR department is different. There, we need to sit together and identify how to centralize it. We can create a policies and procedures that should not overlap into the departments, and then we need to communicate it to the rest of the departments. That can be done here. But if you think on the risk management perspective, the centralized policies or same department policies can be applied. You just the central team just needs to read it out, whether if it is a very generic way, whether you are covering all the perspective of the departments. Let's say development based risk identification has been criteria has been mentioned in the risk management policy. Then how the HR department risk management risk assessment can be done. There you just need to think. You need to add the risk policy statements to it, how the risk identification has been done in the different departments. You need to document it in the risk register, risk management policy, and then you need to communicate it, roll out to the all departments. That's how you can achieve the ISO 27001 and SOC 2. Yes.
Karthik, you can unmute yourself if you have any question that you would like to ask Sudarsan directly. I think he has dropped two questions for you also in the chat.
Yes. Yes. Uh, yes, Karthik. So your question is around what is vendor risk assessment, right? So when an organization business requirement and business it develops, like let's take an organization developing a product, okay? So there will be some of the people, some of the other smaller companies that they are providing some laptops and assets to the organization. So those kind of sub organization that is providing services to the main organization are called vendors. Okay, so when the vendors provide any services to the organization, then the organization needs to do a risk assessment for the vendor. Let's say if you are going to buy something for your organization, what you need to do, you just need to think what kind of risk the organization can bring. Let's say we are using some of the assets from a vendor that is providing us, then we need to think what kind of assets they are providing, what kind of risk that the asset will bring it to the organization. Okay, so this is just a basic thinking, risk thinking of vendor perspective. So when a vendor providing you any service, you need to think on what kind of possible impact that the services that is provided by the vendor can bring into the organization. We need to think on that. We need to create a procedure to do the risk assessment. Let's say if we have a standardized process, policies, and procedures, we will have a criteria. If the organization, the vendor, they are gonna get into our main organization, what we need to do, we need to have a specific criteria for this asset giving services providing organization. Let's say laptop providing organization. Then we need to have a criteria. These assets shall be secured, shall be wiped out before giving it to us. Like that, we need to have create a criteria for that. So that's how a risk assessment approach should look like. I'm just giving a aspect of a laptop providing organization, but you need to think on the every perspective of how the service is provided to your organization. What kind of service can be what kind of service that is provided to your organization will bring any impact to the organization, that you need to think of. For that, there are multiple risk assessment uh, questionnaires that you can ask to the organization based on the service that they are providing. Once you are very clear that the organization that is providing service to us is not bringing any impact or any is not bringing any risk to the organization, then you can directly accept the vendor to provide the services to the organization. That's how we reduce the risk of vendor risk. Let's say I'll give you one example. There is a recent Starbucks incident happened. Okay, a security vulnerability was there in the vendor management system. Okay, vendor uh, company that is providing services to the Starbucks. What happened? An hacker tried to exploit the vulnerability in the vendor system, and then they came it into the came from the vendor system to the Starbucks entity. So there, if the Starbucks have done a very good vendor assessment, then this risk should have been avoided. So that is the case why we are doing a vendor risk assessment. So it is very crucial part we need to do. So for your next question, why we need a risk register? Yes, in to answer you in a simpler terms, it is for accountability. The top management should know where we are standing, should know what are the risks that the organization have. So for that, how you can let the management know that these are the risks that we have. For that, the organization department will have a risk register for them. They will collectively make a centralized risk register, and then the GRC team or a responsible team will share it to the uh, top management that these are the risks that has been identified and recorded in the past 6 months. These are the corrective actions taken for this risk, but these are the risk that is still persistent in our organization. What can be done here? So this gives the transparency to the top management. Top management will decide based on the risk that has been identified in the previous quarter or previous biannual timeline. Okay. Yes. I think I have answered your question, Karthik Sriram. If you have any queries, just type it here. Moving up to the Swapnika's question, it's like finding the services slash assets from other departments that bring the critical one first and then take the rest. Exactly, Swapnika. We need to find the services and assets that activities that has been done from the other department. We need to read out our policies that we have already created, and we need to think the policies will suffice the requirements of the other department. If it is not, we need to tweak the policies. If it is fine, then we can use the same policy for other departments as well. Exactly. Yes. Yes, team. I'm happy to take questions from you if you have any more.
Are there any more questions? Uh, okay. Let's wait for 2 minutes, Sudarshan. If there are no questions, then we'll just end the session.
Sure.
Then, guys, just let us know how did you like the session by Sudarshan? And if you have any feedbacks, you can drop those as well. All right. I guess there are no more questions. So, guys, if you want to ask a question later, you can always reach out to Sudarshan or reach out to us at Payatu. We would be very happy to answer your questions. Uh, there would be more such sessions in the future. We hope you attend and let us know how much you get from the session in the future. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, everyone.